Welcome to Recruiter Wins, your bite-sized 15-minute podcast with your host, Zack Gallinger. This is the show where every guest answers one simple question. Tell me about your biggest recruiting win. You'll hear everything from gut-wrenching candidate conversations to game-changing business development wins. Real stories with lessons you can actually use in your next search.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Recruiter Wins. My name is Zack Gallinger and I'm the founder of Talent Hero Media, a digital marketing agency that works exclusively with recruiters. In this podcast, we sit down with a highly successful recruiting expert to ask them a single question. Tell me about your biggest recruiting win. Our guest today is David Case, a recruiter specializing in engineering and construction. David has been doing this for about 20 years now, so I'm sure he's going to share a ton of useful information. David, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Zach.
Of course. All right. As we always do, let's dive right in. Tell me about your biggest recruiting win.
Zach, one of the largest recruiting wins that I've had or that we've had here at Advastar is really a phone conversation that started as a cold call, right? This was at the very beginning stages, only a few months in of Advastar, which originated about 15 years ago. And I didn't have a book of business. I didn't have a client base. I didn't have a CRM tool. It was myself with a phone, a notebook, a pen, and just some hustle. So I had locked myself in my home office at that time, and I was literally calling anyone I could call who could be a potential lead, a potential client, potential hiring manager, etc. I had a name of an individual that I had received from my brother. My brother is who is in the construction industry. And he'd say, "Hey, call this gentleman. Who knows what will come of it, but he's a nice guy. Good person. He'd been deer hunting with him here recently, etc. He'll know me, remember me, tell me you're my brother. You guys might have a good conversation." So I called this individual. He, of course, answered the phone. I introduced myself quickly, mentioned who my brother was. He said, "Sure, happy to talk with you." So he and I had a good conversation. This hiring manager was very involved in the wind energy construction space at that time. And so we had a good conversation. I referenced my experience in construction, recruiting and staffing, and supporting hourly rate, traveling contractors and construction management and skilled trades folks, et cetera. And we had a fantastic conversation, built some quick rapport, but ultimately you could kind of just tell it was one of those conversations that really wasn't going anywhere in that moment. Great opportunity to introduce myself and Advastar to be a resource for future needs. But you could, again, quickly tell after 10 minutes or so, it was more of a get to know you thing, and that conversation was trailing off. And right at the last portion of that phone conversation, it was trailing off, and I said, "Hey, Bob, hey, real quickly, by the way, we were talking more about the wind energy portion or piece of your business. What about the industrial plant side of your business?" And you could tell just that one question or those couple of sentences, it changed everything in his demeanor and in kind of his posture over the phone. And he said, "Oh, the industrial plant side." He goes, "Gosh, thanks for asking." And he goes, "Actually, I just got out of a board meeting here like 2 days ago, and we need 50 skilled tradespeople for this project down in the Gulf Coast. Can you help us with these skilled trades individuals?" And I said, "Absolutely, we can. What do you need? And when do you need them?" And all the respective details that we need to go out and be able to help folks. And so I had never recruited on this particular skill set before, but I was confident. I was nervous and excited at the same time, but I was confident in my abilities because, again, I'd done a lot of hourly rate per diem traveling contractor type individuals prior to that. And so I hung up the phone, and again, as I was excited and I was nervous, and I called a couple people quickly. I said, "Hey, can I find these people?" And they said, "Sure, you can." And so I had no database, or the company didn't have no company database or my own database. I didn't have access to any paid databases, et cetera. And I literally just started hammering the phone, right? I did know of one very specific niche industry platform that I could utilize. I leveraged that very quickly. And that first day of getting off the phone with him and having about this information, I felt like I had, some tremendous opportunity for me to go figure it out and prove myself. And so I immediately got busy on recruiting individuals, and ultimately I ended up identifying 6 individuals that I sent over to him at 12:30 that night, right? 12:30 that night, I was packaging this group of people up that I'd been talking to and screening that day, sent them over. "Hey, Bob, here's a grouping of candidates that are available for your project and I think have the requisite skill sets and experience to work well for you. 5:30 that next morning, I get up and he's just moments ago has sent me a response. And he said, this looks like a great start. Keep them coming. And he CC'd 3 or 4 or 5 other people. I knew when he'd CC'd those 5 other people that was kind of like, hey, that meant something. That meant that now I'm in it and I'm engaged in it. And it really went on from there. And that has proven to be the absolute largest from a revenue standpoint and largest from a helping them multiple site locations on multiple projects over the course of the last 15 years. That's still a client today. So again, it just kind of goes to show sometimes you don't necessarily know where these opportunities are going to be coming from. Sometimes it can be one little nuanced question or added curiosity that can sometimes make the difference. And then certainly then in this case, besides just the added curiosity, oftentimes I think in this industry, recruiting and staffing and many other industries, it's really just having that can-do spirit, right? Again, I didn't have exact experience with that particular skill set, but I said yes. And I said yes in a competent way where he believed in me, and he should have, because I believed in myself and then just went and made it happen, right? And so it was very much helped set the trajectory of our company. We were a new company at that time and absolute game changer for us as an organization.
Well, that's a really good story. I am very impressed that you were able to sort of do that right out of the gate as a first client. That's probably not the way it typically goes for most recruiters. And I do have a few follow-up questions. You mentioned that you had this kind of pivot moment where you said, like, what about the industrial plant side? And you kind of completely flipped this like dead end call. So I guess my question is, how do you have that instinct to ask the question that changes everything? Is it something you think you can teach, or is it something that's innate? Where does that come from?
Well, I think in an ideal world, it might be innate in different team members that folks have on our teams. But certainly, I was in training with a couple newer team members yesterday, and I referenced the fact that, yeah, we call this, recruiting, or we're recruiters, many of us in these roles. But I think another really fantastic name or important name that goes hand in hand with recruiter is someone who's an investigator, right? And someone who really very much has that curious and investigative mindset, and who isn't afraid to ask those follow-up questions, right? Probably the more natural thing was to just get off the phone there, the way that phone call was heading. And I probably had to do a little bit of, oh, wait, but hey, by the way, right? I probably had to do one of those if I really reflect back on it, but that's fine, right? And I think that sometimes we as people can get really, hey, I have to say the perfect thing. I had to say it in the perfect order, or do I have to have the script? And what I found is just being a real person, right? Being real and being authentic, that really translates well. And it's okay if you have to go, hey, by the way, what about, we talked about this, and this. What about that other thing? What about that other group? What about that other division? What about these other departments? What about your other business units? What about your other geographic locations or whatever? And so certainly I learned that early in my career, and certainly have tried to share and impart that type of mindset when talking or training with new team members, because often I think perhaps you might think sometimes that might be surely that client hiring manager, that company leader would be thinking of this. And if I'm telling them I'm a good guy who can go recruiting, wouldn't they think of all those things for me? And I found out that that's not necessarily the case, right? Folks have a lot on their plate. And so I try to ensure that I'm asking some of those things, or ensuring to share some of the ways that we could be of assistance.
Yeah, no, I get that from my own experience as well. Like those sales calls where they seem like they're not going anywhere. If you pay really close attention and you're willing maybe to go like a little bit off script, like everyone has sort of the structure of how they want things to go. But if you're willing to deviate intelligently, I agree that you can often make something out of nothing. So, okay, next question here. You said they offered you, or they said they had 50 skilled trade roles to fill, and you had basically zero infrastructure. How did you know to say yes to that? I mean, I feel like a lot of other people probably wouldn't have the confidence to kind of take that on before they had sort of laid the groundwork internally at their company.
Yeah. It's one of those pure entrepreneurial type stories. Like I had nothing, right? When I said nothing, I mean, I had next to no money in the bank, nothing to speak of, right? I didn't have a bunch of systems and tools and resources, like I said. I mean, nothing. I didn't have maybe at that time people were using Monster or CareerBuilder or some other industry databases or what have you. I had none of that. I didn't have a LinkedIn recruiter seat. That was expensive, right? I literally had a notebook. I'm old school. I still use a notebook, but I had a notebook and a pen and my phone and of course, my laptop computer. But it was that entrepreneurial story where there's a massive opportunity and I couldn't afford to say no, right? Because that was it. I knew it in that moment. That was my catalyst. That was my opportunity. That was the seminal moment for me with Advastar being brand new, that was going to be able to go from, maybe we had a couple people out there working for us, but this was going to be something that would be an absolute game changer. And that was correct. It was just one of those absolute pivotal moments where, you hear this in whether it's in athletic endeavors or any type, all kinds of different achievement type endeavors where someone just commits to saying, I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I know I'm going to commit to it. I'm going to figure it out. And then that's exactly what happened there.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think that ability to just kind of go for it. I mean, that might be innate. And I don't know, like some people are just kind of risk takers and some people are really risk averse. And I don't know if that's something that can really be changed that much. So
yeah, that one was a unique one. I mean, there was even a scenario. I mean, I had very much a little bit of, I had some sleepless nights about, hey, how am I even going to meet payroll? Right? I mean, that was a monster payroll because we had these individuals who were working.
Right. They're on your payroll, right? At this point.
Yeah, they're working 710s, 712s on a large industrial project, turnaround project, and we had to meet per diem, et cetera. In this unique instance, I called them and I asked them to front me money. I'd never heard of that before, right? And they did it, right? And they wired me, whatever it was, $50,000. And, then I went to a bank and I said, hey, I've got this opportunity and it's real and got a contract. And hey, by the way, they wired me $50,000 in good faith. And it was just a series of those type of just being action oriented and figuring it out and that allowed that to all play out the way that it has.
Right. Yeah. Action oriented. I think that's a good phrase to describe it. Last question. And in the interest of time, I'm going to maybe ask you to tell one of these two stories. So just for the audience, Dave and I were talking offline before about some really interesting stories he had about where he's met recruiting clients in maybe unusual situations. You mentioned you had one story about a concert, one story about a retail store. Which one do you think's better? And I'd like to hear it.
Yeah, you're right. Both pretty good stories. And certainly we think of, I think of, and we think of sales and our marketing and business development efforts very much twofold, right? There's a lot of the efforts that you and your team have helped us with, Zach, that are very much, methodical and precision geared around, the industries that are priority focused niche industries. And utilizing a lot of automations and technology, et cetera, to have those things happening in a very specific way, methodical way with a cadence, and it's very structured. And there's a lot of beauty in that. And that's been invaluable to us in our organization. At the same time, I have something that's kind of the opposite of that. And it's just always keeping an awareness, right? And when I say awareness, just truly awareness. It doesn't mean that I'm out there saying, hey, where's a staffing up? Where's a recruiting opportunity? Where's a staffing opportunity? Where's a recruiting staffing up? Where's a staffing opportunity? But it's about in life, sometimes, again, you mentioned the concert example. I happened to be at a concert, and this is years ago. And I turned around and I asked the gentleman I was with, took my mom to a concert. I said, hey, would you mind taking a picture of my mom and I before the concert starts? Sure, he says. So he takes a picture. I shake his hand, introduce myself. And, hey, what do you do? What do you do? I said, well, I'm in recruiting and staffing. What about you? He's like, I own a bunch of businesses. We should probably talk. I talked to him the next day and we got a high level CFO level position for him. And ultimately over the course of the next 3 years, probably filled 30 different positions for him. So the gist of it is you just never know sometimes in our world, at least, where opportunities come. And so I'm pretty quick to conversate with someone. And certainly I don't have an expectation of any conversation, but know that sometimes it can be in the most unpredictable scenario where someone might be excited to meet us or there might be some type of commonality there to be able to help each other out. Certainly that was one of them that worked out well for all sides.
Right. I mean, you're clearly an extroverted person who likes to talk. And I imagine that is a very valuable skill in any sort of sales-based job. And that's obviously a big element of recruiting.
It sure doesn't hurt.
All right. Well, I think that's all the questions I have today, David. Thanks again for joining us.
Zach, we appreciate you and all you all do at Talent Hero. Thank you, sir.
All right. Have a good one. Thanks for listening to Recruiter Wins. This episode has been brought to you by Talent Hero Media, the digital marketing agency that works exclusively with recruiters to help them win more business and scale faster.